Hello, hello. Good afternoon. It is Tuesday. It is May, and it has been a minute since I have been on live with you all. For those of you who don't know, I am Dr. Maisha, founder of the Mind Remapping Company, and I teach people about their brain, behavior, and the unconscious mind. I give them trauma informed tools to be able to heal, and I do this work inside of organizations and I do individual certifications. So, hi there. I see Vital Work Life has joined, one of the organizations that I work with. Very, very cool. So, I want to talk today a little bit about something, and it's really about how sometimes our past, and particularly our past traumas, can get in the way of our progress. Now I'm sharing this today. If you know me, you know that I do have things that I plan to talk about, and then there are things that come up in like real time in real life that I like to share. And because I really like to, share on the court stories so that you understand that the work that I do and I talk about, our unconscious and how that impacts our behavior, how that impacts our thought processes and our decisions. Like this is real stuff. And even though I've been in this work for over a decade, I'm still in that process. It's an ongoing process, personal development, professional development. It is an ongoing, everyday process. You may, if you've been following me, if you listen to this podcast, if you listen to my lives, I say that this is a personal development, professional development is personal development, and personal development is a mountain with no top. So, um, I really want to share about what can happen or what it can look like when our past gets in the way of our progress. So, as you know, I have the company that I have, but I also do work in the in organizations in the anti-oppression, anti-racism space, and I do this work with a partner. Now, what's interesting is that me and this partner have been doing this work together for now. We're going to be celebrating our 3-year anniversary here together in the summertime, and we have the company. And what's been interesting is that while I have been integrally involved in the creation of our work, in the creation of our content, in the dealing of the business, um, and I'm sharing some some real honest stuff here. I actually have not legally been part of the business. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. Um, my partner has been wanting me to be legally a part of this business since the very beginning, and it has been my own resistance, my own hesitancy to do that. And why is that, right? Why is that? Well, I only in the last few months, as I've been doing a lot of deep work on my own resistances, realize that there is some, and there have been a couple of times where I've said, yes, let's do it. And then we've gotten into the process, and there came a point in the process where I hit a wall and I'm like, oh, no, 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 this is too much. This is too much. And I backpedal. So what I realized over the past couple of months, and really even as recently, some new learnings of this week, is that this hesitancy, this hard stop, this backpedaling really for me was a trauma response. And you hear I talk a lot about the things these trauma responses, and I talk a lot about trauma. But what I realized is that what I was there were things that I was afraid of in moving into a legally binding partnership that was based on my past, based on not necessarily past in business, but just past relationships, and also what I had seen. A lot of times, sometimes our trauma is direct, we experience it. Sometimes our trauma is vicarious, we witness it, right? And so, what I had been witnessing around partnerships, personal and professional, and what they look like if they do not end amicably. And my path, and that the vicarious trauma of witnessing that up close informed my decision to always be solo in practice. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't collaborated. I've collaborated with many people, I've worked with many people. And what I can get is that my decision or my choice to be in a business as a sole owner for so many years and partner with many people, and from a contractual standpoint, but not from a legal partnership standpoint, has been informed by the teachings of my past, and specifically traumatic teachings of my past. So it's just very interesting for me to realize that, because now for so many years I have, avoided this sort of like legal partnership, but not because of anything of anything my partner has done, but because of my own fears. So now we're moving into this next phase of legalizing the partnership, and that's all great and good. But I really got that there are things in our lives that we don't even realize, right? And these things that had happened in my past were way in my past. We're talking, childhood. My mom is the OG entrepreneur, so I've seen her, you know start businesses, be in partnership, not be in partnership. I've seen people in my life, like adjacent mentors, be in partnership, and talk about partnerships and in partnerships, legally, business and personal. And so these are things that are way in my past that are unconsciously informing my decisions. And this is one of the reasons why I talk so much about the unconscious mind, and that 90% of what runs us is not conscious, is unconscious, and it is informed by our past. So what happens is when these resistances come up, we need to begin to look at, well, what is the source of those resistances? And for a long time, and we could philosophize and we could speculate consciously, and it's useful to dig deeper. So when I think about, the client, the work that I do with my clients, I often am doing a lot of still one-on-one work with clients and helping them to get underneath when the invisible barriers that block them from moving forward in their goals. And the work that I do with timeline therapy techniques, with hypnotherapy, really helps to get under the surface. So as I'm moving through this process, I'm going to pose a question, and this is a question for you to contemplate. Where are the places in your life, and particularly in your career, in your business? I've seen people who want to start businesses, and they get to a point and there's a bunch of, yeah buts, or I don't want to set a deadline. There are a lot of these various, what they sound like is different, but these resistances that come up. What are some areas of resistance in your life, business, relationships that you notice that could actually be a result of something in the past that you've learned, that maybe you've learned unconsciously, right? And so I'm asking that to ponder as I move through this. What does this sound like? This sounds like, well, first of all, it could feel like something. How do we determine, like, how do we really, sometimes when we are thinking about resistance, we're thinking about it has to look a certain way or it has to sound a certain way. But sometimes you first feel it in your body. So for me, what I notice is that sort of tension in the chest and in the gut, in the belly. And so, we want to notice when, say, a promotion's coming up, or when there's an opportunity to maybe collaborate with someone, or you're invited to be on a podcast or to speak, or something that would take you outside your comfort zone. And yes, stepping outside the comfort zone does feel a kind of way. But when you get to like that hard stop barrier where you're actually backpedaling, you're running, that kind of resistance, what does that feel like in your body? So that may be the first place to notice, right? What does that feel like in your body? The next thing you want to think about was what is going through your mind, right? What is going through your mind? What is your brain telling you about this the potential threat of this opportunity or this next step that you're going to take. And I can share with you that for sure, as I was thinking about this partnership with my colleague, with my business partner, um, there it really did occur as a threat. And when we talk about trauma, we talk about these 5 ways that the system responds to threat, right? Our brain responds involuntarily to threat in these 5 ways, the fight, flight, freeze, and then what some called submit, which is like a tend to befriend, like a feign, and then the fatigue or faint. Right. So these are the 5 ways that people can respond. And you might notice yourself inside of these at any given time within different contexts. So for me, the my in certain contexts I'm a fleer, and in this particular backpedaling context that's what I found myself doing, freezing and then fleeing that particular opportunity. So what does that feel like? What is your brain telling you? What is the threat, right? Whether it feels like a physical threat, an emotional threat, a psychological threat, or a social threat, real or perceived. Oftentimes, even if the threat is perceived, the brain will tell you a thing and the involuntary response will happen, right? And then there is, well, is that true? Right? It's Byron Katie asked this question, is that true? What is the evidence that this is absolutely true, that this is a threat? And began to look at when was the first time that I noticed that feeling or that thought in my brain. And it's one of the ways that we can start to get at, the source of what are these resistances that are from our past, and be able to begin to see like how could that be impeding our progress or getting in the way of our progress. So one of the things that I saw was that being in a circumstance where I am um, intimately and integrally involved in all of the processes and the intellectual property of the organization without having an actual stake in it. And this is something that my partner's been telling me as well, um, is actually getting in the way and potentially harming me. And if I take the emotion out of it, and for those of you who I think in a past podcast, I've talked about the 3 positions of perspective, or the 3 positions of listening. Position 1 is like looking through your own eyes. Position 2 is looking through the eyes of another. And position 3 is sort of the observer perspective. So if I go into the observer perspective and I'm looking down on the situation and I detach myself from the immediate emotions of the fear or the concern or whatever that is, then I can see, yes, the way that I am interacting in this circumstance could be more of harm than it is of good. So in that way, my own past, that trauma is getting in the way of my progress. And so we begin to like really look and take an observer position and look at, where are the things that are past traumas that have happened to us, or that we have experienced, I should say, that we have experienced, that sometimes are are are, are reactivated by certain circumstances in our life or certain opportunities in our life. Where is it that they are getting in the way of our progress? Now, I very much encourage that you do this work with someone else, because we have blind spots. I do this work with someone else. I don't do my own coaching. That's not the way it works. But this is why I talk about the work that I talk about. This is why I do the work I do. This is why I teach it in organizations, because whether you work with someone like me or whether you find a therapist, it's very important to address these places of harm, these places, these wounds that may have not healed. And what happens is that they're in our subconscious or they're in our unconscious. But when something happens out in the world that mimics that place of harm, then it reopens that wound. And we may not be conscious of it. We just have that immediate involuntary response, that immediate involuntary trauma response that has us backpedal or run away or freeze or fight or get really tired or fatigued, right? Or some people faint. But I mean, like in the real world, what that looks like is that just like all of a sudden you're just completely tired and fatigued, right? These can be responses from our past. And that's why I'm always talking about how important it is to heal the past. Because when we heal the past, we actually heal the future, right? And we also stop generational conversations that we could be passing on to our next generation, whether it's our own children, like our own DNA children, whether it's our people we care for, whether it's our students, whether it's our nieces and nephews, whomever that might be. When we heal our past wounds, when we heal those wounds, then we actually heal conversations that and stop those cycles that could be passed on to the next generation. So so that's really what I wanted to share today. I just wanted to come in and just, like, give you a food for thought, right? A food for thought on another reason why we should be healing these old wounds, and for you to inquire, for you to be in the curiosity and the investigation and the inquiry of what are the things that you notice that you're resisting. And when I say resisting, I mean constantly resisting or constantly in a battle about, right? Sometimes it's not just one resistance. It's you come upon the same thing, it may look different, the same, types of things. And you're finding yourself in this physical resistance, this stuck place. What's the wound that has you be stuck? And who and where can you begin to heal that wound? Where's the first place that you noticed that wound appeared, right? And sometimes we can't put our finger on what it is. We can't even sometimes put our finger on what the emotion is. But we know that there's something there stopping us. And so what are those areas? And sometimes you'll find that those things that stop you are similar across different areas of life. Maybe the things that stop you in business, the opportunities that stop you in business are the same things that stop you in your personal relationships, that stop you in your parenting, that stop you with your family of origin. Maybe it stops you in your friendships. So when you begin to notice the trends of a particular resistance um, across different areas of life, that indicates that there's possibly a wound that needs to be healed. So, um, your homework, because in full coach fashion, I love to give opportunity work, is to just notice this week, what are those resistances? And if you don't already have someone that you can work with, I highly, highly encourage you to find someone. Find someone, whether it's someone locally, someone that looks like you, someone that is feels like a safe space to work with, to begin to explore those. Because I'm telling you, when we begin to open up and explore and heal from the inside out, then some of the barriers that we experience in the outside world, we see pathways to be able to navigate around. Sometimes the barriers fall away completely because sometimes those barriers were created by us. And we know in the real world that there are, or in the world, the real world that we experience, there are um, these systemic obstacles, let's say. There are systemic obstacles that exist. However, when we begin to heal those wounds that bring up those resistances, a lot of times it allows us to see things that we have not seen before. And while healing those can be out, and I'm just going to backtrack because I want to say this. I don't want to gloss pot by this. Healing can feel scary. It can feel scary because sometimes you don't know how deep the well goes. This is why I recommend you do this with a professional, a trained professional, right? This is why I recommend, whether it's a therapist or a psychiatrist or a trauma trained coach, a trauma informed, trauma responsive coach. Um, I recommend you do this work with someone because it can feel scary and it can get scary. And because you don't always know how deep does this well go. And when you work with someone who's trained to do this work, then it creates that place of safety to move you through and regrounds you towards the end. And, understanding that this is a longitudinal process. This is you might not be working with a therapist for lifelong or a coach for lifelong, but the growth is a longitudinal process. And we heal in layers. I've been doing this work for over a decade, and it's layers just keep pulling back, just keep pulling back. And after a while it becomes a beautiful experience, especially to come out on the other side. So, um, it's so funny. I just went in a little bit on that tangent and lost the train of thought of where I was going with it. But just to notice these areas and notice these places and begin to investigate, where can you begin the healing? Who can you begin the healing with? Like looking for, the people who can support you, the safe spaces. Oh, I know I was saying that healing can be scary, but it is beautiful on the other side. So I encourage you to investigate and be curious about that. And then when you come to that space of curiosity, when you come to that space where you feel like, you know what, I think I know where this could be coming from, reach out. Reach out and find a safe professional space to do this work with. Okay. Um, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the work that I do in organizations, um, I'm streaming here on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and YouTube, and on Instagram. You can reach out to me directly and message me. You can also, if you see me here on the Facebook or LinkedIn profile platform, you can go to my website. If you're on Instagram here with me live, you can go to my bio and click and go to the website and learn a little bit more about what I do. If you are a coach or a therapist or a person who works with others and you're interested in learning about how to bring these trauma-informed tools to your own community, you can go to the website mindremappingacademy.com and you can learn more about our trainings. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you. We're back on schedule. For our weekly lives. So I'll be seeing you next week. I will share with you, if you're listening to me on the replay or on the podcast, we will be coming to the end of a season soon. So I will let you know. We'll wrap that up towards the middle to end of June, and share with you some of the exciting things we'll be having come up in the interim for the summer. And you will be hearing me guest on podcasts as well. So look out if you're following me here on social media. I will be posting some of the guesting that I'm doing on other people's podcasts to lift them up as well. Many wonderful, wonderful creators and podcasters. So you all have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye now.